We're in Maui. Why didn't you come to the airport yesterday, sweetie? My mother's sugary voice drifted through the phone, making my stomach turn. I stood frozen in the middle of San Francisco International Airport, my packed suitcase beside me, as the truth slowly sank in. They had deliberately lied about our flight date. My name is Melanie Carter, and I never thought my own parents would stoop this low. I had been looking forward to this family vacation for months, desperate for a break after an exhausting quarter at work. As a senior project manager at a high-pressure tech firm, I had just wrapped up a major launch, surviving on caffeine and 3 hours of sleep a night. This trip was supposed to be my reward, a chance to finally unwind, bask in the Hawaiian sun, and reconnect with my family. "What do you mean yesterday?" I managed to say, my voice trembling. "You told me the flight was today at 2 p.m. I have the texts to prove it." The bustling airport suddenly felt suffocating. Around me, travelers moved with excitement, their voices bubbling with anticipation. Their joy only made my devastation more pronounced. "Oh, sweetie, there must have been some confusion," my mother replied. But I could hear the lie. "Your sister made it just fine. We're all settled in at the resort now." Of course, my sister made it. Emily was always their priority, the golden child, the perfect one. I should have known something was off when they insisted on booking the flights themselves. They claimed it would be easier that way. The same parents who depended on me to help cover their bills somehow didn't trust me to book my own ticket. "This wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom," I said, my voice growing stronger as fury overtook the initial shock. "You deliberately gave me the wrong date. You never wanted me on this trip, did you?" Silence. Then, a dismissive sigh. "Now, Melanie, don't be dramatic. These things happen." I ended the call. My fingers clenched around my phone. All around me, families embraced, excited for their vacations. Meanwhile, I stood alone, betrayed by the people who should have cared about me the most. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been sending my parents money for years. After my father retired early due to health issues, I had stepped in without hesitation. Every month, I wired them $2,000 to help cover their mortgage, utilities, and medical expenses. When unexpected hospital bills arrived, I paid them. Last year alone, I had given them over $30,000, money I had been saving for a down payment on my first home. And yet, when it came time for a family vacation, I wasn't even worth a plane ticket. Looking at my useless suitcase, I felt tears prick at the edges of my eyes. But more than sadness, a burning rage rose inside me. This wasn't just about a missed vacation. This was about years of manipulation. Years of being the second choice. Years of being used. I had always wondered if my parents truly saw me as their daughter, or just as their personal ATM. Growing up, everything revolved around Emily. Her ballet recitals. Her straight A's. Her future in the arts. I learned early on to live in her shadow, always the responsible one, the one who took care of things. After graduating college, I threw myself into my career, working insane hours to build something for myself. While Emily chased her dream of becoming a fashion influencer, fully funded by our parents, I was grinding my way up the corporate ladder. At 32, I was one of the youngest project managers at my firm, overseeing multi-million-dollar campaigns and leading a team of 20. Meanwhile, Emily still lived at home, bouncing from one passion project to another, never holding a real job. When my parents struggled financially, who did they call? Me. And I answered. Every single time. But this was different. They had made it loud and clear. I was good enough to pay their bills, but not good enough to sit beside them on a flight to Maui. I exhaled sharply and made a decision. Instead of heading home defeated, I rolled my suitcase toward the nearest airline counter. "Hi," I said to the agent. "What's the next available flight to the Maldives?" She blinked in surprise. "The Maldives?" "Yes. If my family didn't want me on their vacation, fine. I was going to take a better one without them." "We're so blessed to have such a generous daughter," my mother would say during our weekly calls. But those calls always ended the same way, updates about Emily's latest brand deal, her growing social media following, or the new sponsorship she had lined up. They never asked about my work or my life unless they needed something. 2 months ago, when they mentioned planning a family trip to Maui, I was thrilled. Finally, a chance to spend quality time together. They insisted on handling all the arrangements since Dad had airline miles to use. Don't worry about anything, they said. Just focus on your big client meeting. We'll take care of everything. Like a fool, I believed them. I even transferred extra money to their account to help cover the resort expenses. It's the least I can do, I told myself, imagining lazy days on the beach and family dinners watching the sunset. I thought maybe this trip would be different. Maybe they would finally see me as more than just their financial safety net. Instead, here I was, standing in an empty airport with a packed suitcase and a broken heart. My phone buzzed. A new message. A photo from Emily, her and my parents on the beach, cocktails in hand. The caption read, "Family vacation begins. Missing you, sis. Wish you could have made it." The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Standing there in the airport, staring at Emily's photo, something inside me finally snapped. I scrolled through past messages from my parents, and the pattern became crystal clear. Every conversation about the trip had been carefully orchestrated to ensure I'd miss it. The flight's at 2 p.m. on the 15th, my mom had texted. But looking at Emily's Instagram story, I saw their boarding passes, dated the 14th. Clear as day. They hadn't made a mistake. They had planned this deception down to the last detail. My phone rang. Dad. I answered, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Melanie, he started, his voice stern, like I was a child being scolded. Your mother is very upset by your attitude. We made an honest mistake with the dates, and you're turning this into drama. You're a grown woman. You should understand these things happen. I laughed. But there was no humor in it. An honest mistake? I repeated. Then why did Emily know the correct date? Why did you insist on booking everything yourselves? Why have you been lying to me for weeks? Silence. Then, Dad tried again. Now, listen here. No, Dad, he listened. My voice was shaking, but it was firm. I just checked my bank statements. Last week, I sent you $3,000 for this trip. Was that a mistake too? Or did you take my money knowing you'd leave me behind? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Melanie, he finally said, his tone softer, shifting tactics. You know we're on a fixed income. We needed that money for the trip. You're doing so well in your career, you understand about making sacrifices for family, don't you? My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Sacrifices for family. I had been making sacrifices for years. I had given up my savings. My dream of buying a house. Everything just to support them. And this was how they repaid me? Don't be selfish, my father snapped. Your sister needed this vacation. She's been under so much stress with her career. Her career? I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Her career? You mean the influencer hobby you've been funding with my money? While she lives rent-free in your house. Dad's voice rose. That's enough. I won't stand for this disrespect. You've changed, Melanie. Money has made you cruel. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, but it was drowned out by something stronger. Clarity. I had spent years trying to earn my parents' love. Proving my worth. Taking care of them because I thought that's what a good daughter was supposed to do. But this was my wake-up call. I steadied my voice. You're right, Dad. I have changed. He scoffed. Finally, something we agree on. I won't be sending you money anymore. Silence. Then what? I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. You heard me. No more checks. No more bank transfers. You and Mom can figure it out, just like you figured out how to take that vacation without me. His voice hardened. Melanie, don't you dare. I ended the call. And just like that, I was free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one walking away. There, but now it was hardening into resolve. You're right about one thing, Dad, I have changed. And things are about to change even more. I ended the call and opened my banking app. It was time to close the bank of Melanie permanently. The drive home from the airport was a blur of anger and determination. I spent the evening documenting everything, screenshots of text messages, bank transfers, and a detailed spreadsheet of every penny I had given them over the past 2 years. The total made my stomach turn. $47,800. That's what my parents' love had cost me. The next morning, I walked into my bank and closed the joint account I had set up to transfer money to them. Then, I called my company's HR department to remove my parents as beneficiaries from my life insurance policy. With each step, I felt lighter, as if I was finally breaking free from the invisible chains that had bound me for years. That's when the messages started. First came the guilt trips from my mother. "I can't sleep knowing you're upset with us. This is tearing our family apart. How could you be so heartless?" Then, Emily joined in. "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic. It was just a miscommunication. Mom's crying every day because of you." But it was my father's message that really showed their true colors. "We raised you better than this. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Your mother needs her medication refilled this week. Don't you dare abandon your responsibilities to this family." I stared at my phone, amazed by their audacity. My responsibilities? What about their responsibility to treat me with basic respect? Instead of responding, I drafted a clear, firm email. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Emily. I've done a lot of thinking since yesterday. The Hawaii incident wasn't a miscommunication. It was a deliberate choice to exclude me while still taking my money. This pattern of behavior ends now. Effective immediately, I am cutting off all financial support. The money I have provided was a choice, not an obligation. You will need to find another way to cover your expenses. Do not contact me about money again. I need time and space to reevaluate our relationship. Thanks. Melanie." Within minutes, my phone exploded with calls and texts. My mother left sobbing voicemails about how they would lose the house. Emily sent angry messages calling me selfish and heartless. And my father's texts grew increasingly threatening, warning me about consequences if I didn't come to my senses. I blocked them all. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, doubt tried to creep in. Years of conditioning had taught me to put their needs first, to believe I was selfish for setting boundaries. But then I remembered standing in that airport, realizing they had planned and executed their betrayal while spending my money. And just like that, the doubt disappeared. The next day, while I was at work, something unexpected happened. My Aunt Rose, my father's sister, walked into my office. I straightened in my chair, bracing myself for more guilt trips. Instead, she surprised me. "I heard what happened," she said, sitting across from me. "Your parents asked me to talk sense into you." I tensed, but before I could say anything, she shook her head. "What they did was cruel, Melanie. I've watched them take advantage of your kindness for years. It's time someone told you the truth." Tears welled up in my eyes. Finally, someone in my family saw me. Really saw me. Aunt Rose reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "They'll try everything to pull you back in," she warned. "Stay strong. You're doing the right thing." 2 weeks after sending that email, I discovered something that made the Hawaii incident look trivial. Aunt Rose called me during my lunch break. Her voice was tight with concern. "Melanie, I need to show you something. Can you come to my house after work?" When I arrived, she had a stack of paper spread across her kitchen table. My stomach tightened. "What is all this?" I asked. She hesitated before pushing a folder toward me. "Your parents have been lying to you about more than just the Hawaii trip." I flipped open the folder, and my blood ran cold. Bank statements. Loan applications. Debt in my name. Tens of thousands of dollars of debt. Debt I had never taken out. My parents had stolen my identity. Dining room table. Rose's voice was calm, but her words sent ice through my veins. "Your father came to me last week asking for a loan. He let slip some things that didn't add up, so I did some digging." She slid a folder across the table toward me. What she showed me made my blood run cold. Bank statements. Loan applications. Credit card bills. A disturbing picture unfolded before my eyes. My parents hadn't just been using my money for basic expenses, they had been living far beyond their means, counting on my support to cover their extravagant lifestyle. Rose pointed to a credit card statement. "Look at this. They took out a new card in your name 3 months ago. Have you checked your credit report recently? My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and downloaded my credit report. There it was. A $155,000 credit card I never knew existed. They had used my social security number and personal information to open it. That's identity theft, Rose said quietly. It's a crime, Melanie. I felt like I couldn't breathe. How could they do this? Rose wasn't finished. There's more. Remember that story about Emily's influencer career? She's not even in LA working on sponsorships like they told you. She's been living at home this whole time, working part-time at a local coffee shop. My stomach twisted. What? The money they claimed was for her brand deals and content creation? Rose shook her head. They've been using it for gambling. The room spun as the pieces fell into place. The constant requests for more money. The vague explanations. The guilt trips whenever I asked questions. It wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Please, sweetie, we need to talk. Your father is having chest pains from all this stress. If anything happens to him, it'll be your fault. I stared at the message in disbelief and showed it to Rose. She sighed. More manipulation. They're desperate because their house of cards is falling apart without your money. I clenched my fists. What should I do? Rose didn't hesitate. You have two choices. You can press charges for the identity theft, or you can handle this privately. But either way, you need to protect yourself. I thought about the years of sacrifice, of putting their needs before mine, of believing their lies, the chest pains, the tears, the guilt trips. It was all part of their game. I exhaled. I want to talk to them one last time face to face. But I need you there with me. Rose nodded. I'll set it up. But first, we need to gather evidence and freeze your credit. They've shown you who they really are, Melanie. Believe them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything I had given up for them. The house I wanted to buy, the vacations I never took, the savings I should have had. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen years of my life. But as I lay there, something else occurred to me. For the first time in my adult life, I felt clear-headed. The fog of manipulation was lifting, and in its place was steel-like resolve. They wanted to play games? Fine, but this time, I would be the one making the rules. The confrontation was set for Saturday afternoon at Rose's house. I spent the morning with a lawyer, understanding my options regarding the identity theft. Then, I prepared a folder with all the evidence, credit card statements, bank transfers, text messages. Everything I needed them to understand that their game was over. When my parents arrived, Emily was with them. She looked nothing like the carefree girl from her Instagram photos in Maui. Her face was drawn, guilty. They filed into Rose's living room like children called to the principal's office. I took a deep breath. Stay calm. Stay in control. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice steady. I've discovered some things we need to discuss. My mother immediately jumped in, tears already forming. Before you say anything, sweetie, you need to know. No, I cut her off. I'm talking now. I pulled out the credit card statements and laid them on the table. Would anyone like to explain this? The color drained from my father's face. Emily looked confused. But my mother? She jumped in quickly. It was an accident, she said. We were always going to pay it back. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. You expect me to believe that? You took out a credit card in my name. That's a felony. My father's jaw clenched. You wouldn't do that to us. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. Wouldn't I? Silence. Then Emily spoke. I didn't know about this. She looked at our parents, her voice shaking. You told me Melanie was just being selfish. I turned to her. I don't know what lies they fed you, Emily, but you were living off my money too. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I had no sympathy left. I straightened and took a deep breath. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I've already frozen my credit and removed you from my accounts. I've spoken to a lawyer about pressing charges. My mother gasped. My father's face darkened. Don't you dare. I stared him down. That's not your decision to make. Rose stood beside me, her presence a silent show of support. You made your choices, I said. Now you get to live with them. Emergency? We were going to tell you it was an emergency. I laid out more papers in front of them. Like the gambling debts? The maxed out credit cards? Or maybe Emily's fake influencer career? Emily's head snapped up. What do you mean fake? I turned to her. You really don't know, do you? They've been telling me you're in Los Angeles, building your brand, securing sponsorships. That's where all my money supposedly went. Your website, your photography sessions, your rent. Emily's face fell. What? She turned to our parents, her eyes wide with shock. I've been working at a coffee shop this whole time. You told me Melanie refused to help with my career. The room erupted into chaos. Emily started crying, my mother tried to explain, and my father stood up, his face red with anger. Enough, he shouted. We did what we had to do. You don't understand. I locked eyes with him, completely calm. Oh, I understand perfectly. I pulled out my final piece of evidence and placed it in front of them. You committed identity theft. That's a federal crime. The room fell silent. I have two choices here, I continued. Press charges or handle this privately. It's your decision. My mother collapsed into theatrical sobs. You wouldn't. Parents don't steal from their children, Rose interjected. Parents don't lie, manipulate, and commit fraud. Just then, my father clutched his chest and staggered. My heart, he gasped. Call an ambulance. For a moment, I almost fell for it. But then I saw my mother's face. Not panic. Not fear. Calculation. This was their final play. Their last-ditch effort to regain control. No. No more manipulation, I said, my voice firm. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign a repayment agreement for every penny you stole. You're going to close that fraudulent credit card. And you're going to leave me alone. My father straightened up, his heart attack miraculously forgotten. And if we refuse, he asked. I didn't blink. Then I'll press charges, and you can explain your actions to a judge. The silence was deafening. Finally, my father nodded, defeated. My mother stared at the floor, her tears suddenly dry. And Emily? Emily looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. As they signed the repayment agreement my lawyer had prepared, I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, hollow sadness for the family I thought I had. The aftermath. In the weeks that followed, my parents' carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. Without my financial support, they were forced to sell their house and move into a small apartment. The repayment agreement meant most of their retirement income went to paying me back. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Emily moved in with Rose temporarily while she figured out her next steps. She called me one evening, her voice small and uncertain. I had no idea what they were doing, she said. All these years, they played us against each other. I'm so sorry, Melanie. Her apology meant something. But it couldn't erase years of damage. Still, it was a start. My parents made one final attempt to manipulate me. They showed up at my office unannounced, causing a scene in the lobby. We'll lose everything, my mother wailed. After all we've sacrificed for you. I stood my ground, surrounded by concerned colleagues. You lost me, I said calmly. That's the only thing that matters. And that was your choice. Security escorted them out. And as I watched them leave, I felt nothing but peace. The guilt that had weighed me down for years? Gone. I was no longer their ATM. No longer their emotional punching bag. No longer their victim. That evening, I booked a trip to Maui. Just for me. As I confirmed the reservation, I smiled at the irony. They had tried to exclude me from a family vacation. But in doing so, they had given me something priceless. Freedom. 3 months later. I stood on a beach in Maui, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. This wasn't the family vacation I had originally imagined. But it was exactly what I needed. My phone peaceful, without the constant barrage of guilt-tripping messages, buzzed with a text from Rose. They're finally moving out of the house this weekend, she wrote. Emily's enrolled in community college. She's asking about having coffee with you when you're back. I took a deep breath of salt air and replied, Tell her I'm open to it. The repayment plan was working. Slowly but surely, my parents had sold most of their possessions. And every month, a check arrived from them. Not because they were sorry, but because they had no choice. The fraud charges I had held back would surface if they missed a single payment. My mother still tried. Emails from different accounts. We're eating ramen noodles while you live in luxury. Is this what you wanted? I deleted them without responding. Their guilt trips had lost their power over me. At work, I had earned another promotion. The energy I once spent managing their chaos now went into building my own life. I had even started looking at houses, a dream I had put on hold for years while funding their lifestyle. Standing there on the beach, I finally understood. Sometimes, the happiest endings don't involve forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes, they're about walking away and choosing yourself. My parents had planned this Hawaii trip to hurt me, but instead, they had set me free.